Ahoy! I'm Pegleg Don, the chief pirate and designer at Man of the Sea Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about dial design. But I'm not just going to be talking about it. I'm going to take you through the process of creating this beautiful tall ship multi-layer sandwich dial. So stay tuned for episode 4 of The Journey is the Destination, which I'm calling Dial M for Murder, because we're killing it. See you in a moment.
The journey is the destination. Oh, oh, no matter where you go.
Welcome back. So before I start talking about dial design, I need to spend a couple minutes on talking about the Man of the Sea brand, because it directly obviously ties into the concepts of the watches that I would create and the look that I was trying to accomplish. So Man of the Sea really harkens back to kind of a historical, romantic idea of what being a man of the sea is all about. I think a good example is if you were to look at the movie The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Captain Nemo, it was really the idea and the creations, his car and his Nautilus ship, the way that they looked. They were very sleek, almost Art Deco in shape and design, but they carried over the Art Nouveau embellishments and flourishments that made it actually kind of elegant. And I think that elegance is something that's been missing, and that's one of the things that I'm going after is a masculine elegance, if that makes sense. And that's kind of the direction that I went with Man of the Sea. And I think you'll see that in not only the dial design, obviously, subject matter, but the way the dials look. They even have kind of an older feel to them. They're not as high-tech as something that's created in a more modern environment. This is kind of a little more old school, so to speak. And the case design also, obviously, I'm doing things that are very Art Nouveau, in that it's bringing nature into the design of the actual elements. So now that we've kind of done a brief description of the Man of the Sea brand, I can take you inside to the computer now and start to show you the process that I go through in order to design the watch dial. Okay, so the first step is to find an image that has some elements that I want to use, and then license that image so that I can use it in my artwork. So I went to a stock photography shop and I found this great image of a tall ship. And the tall ship part of it was exactly what I was looking for. It's the right orientation, how it's facing. It sits nice on the water. It's the right kind of ship for the era and everything that I wanted to use. I really liked it. Sky, it's kind of interesting, but doesn't. I'm not sure how well that's going to work small on a dial. And the sea has the beginnings of something interesting. So the first thing I have to do is, since working in laser etching is a black and white environment, a dot is either on or off, basically. And depending on the size of the dots and the number of them, you get a grayscale image, much like you do a halftone image in a newspaper. And so the first thing I have to do is I have to desaturate the image. I have to remove all the color from it, because this is basically what I'm going to be able to produce on the laser. And this is just the straight image that I had in a desaturated version of it. Then I did a test laser output of it, and it was flat. The sky, you couldn't see any of the detail in it. It was really light. There was not much to it. So I thought, well, first step is let's try darkening up and adding a little more to the water in these areas here. Maybe I can get something more interesting going on with the sky. So I did another laser output from that. And again, just really flat. Didn't have a lot going on in the sky. So I realized how the sea was improved. But I was like, you know what? I got to do something with that sky. It isn't interesting. So I went and licensed. I found an image that I could license of a sky that I liked. And I incorporated that into the image. Now, if you notice, this is really the part that I like. And then I just cut out a bunch of chunks and threw them in different places, knowing that in the final image and when this is small, this will all look the way I want it to look when the other elements are sitting on top of it. But anyway, a lot more dimension in the sky. So I did a test print of this. And again, much closer, but still not quite there. It needed a little more, I don't know, difference from the outside to the inside of the dial to make it kind of have more depth to it. So I added, what I did is I took the original image at 60% opacity and I overprinted on top of the other layers, overlaid it. And so now I've got an interesting sky. I did a test print of that and that came out very good. So now I've got the elements that I want as far as a sky and the sea and the ship I already had. So now the next thing to do is, since I'm working in a color environment, what do I want to make into different colored items? All right. And the two things really that I have here is I want an orangey sky. So I can go ahead and put a layer of orange overlaid onto that background. Essentially, that's what that orange looks like. It's just transparent orange, and that sits on top of the black and white image. It's going to be very similar to how when I airbrush an orange over the etched aluminum, I will get a similar effect to that. And that's the idea. Then I do the same thing with the blue. So now I've got the orange and the blue. All right, so now I got to start putting the different layers of things that sit on top of that. Obviously, the first and most important thing is the ship. And I know I'm going to want the ship in another layer, and I'm going to keep that layer to be the aluminum and black. So it's going to be kind of black and white, if you would, on that. And it'll give it kind of a rustic look to it. And it'll really pop it off of the sky and the sea. All right, then I have to start putting in other elements that are going to be part of the dial. Okay, so I always have an outer ring, and that serves two purposes. One, it is the glue that holds everything together. If it's on a different layer and it's close to the edge, I can hook to that, and so when I take out certain layers after they've been etched and I remove them so that you can see through to the next layer below it, that allows me to hook things to that. And a good case of that would be, I knew I wanted to have circles in the 12, 3, 6, and 9 positions. And in those circles, though, if you see, they actually hook up to the edge. So if I were to cut out everything but the black circles and the outer edge, I would have just those things that would sit on top of the others. And so that's kind of how the concept is. I build it up from there. So I know that in the for the numbers, I decided I wanted to make numbers out of bones. So there's my 12, here's my 3, and my 9 and my 6. So now it's starting to look like a watch. You know, it's starting to have the elements that are building it. All right, the next thing is then I knew I wanted to have indices in the non-major positions. So I added those, and if you notice, they also intersect with that outside circle, so that if I want to cut those out as part of that outside ring, which I will, they're connected to that as well. All right, so now I've got the basis of the design pretty much going on. Now, how can I make it pop better? What elements can I add to it that will really enhance all the different components and make them pop off the dial, especially when they're smaller? Well, the first thing I can do is I can add glows behind certain things. So I add a glow up here behind the circle on the 12 and the 3 and the 6 and the 9. And so that lights those up and makes them more interesting. And if you notice, the glow is under the blue layer and under the orange layer. So it'll just create the white glow on the layer, and then when I paint it orange, it should look fairly similar to this. All right, so I've got that. Now I can do the same thing with the indices as well. I can add a glow layer to them, and that really makes them pop off. All right, so now the only problem I'm really having with this image right now is that the ship itself is too similar to the water down at the water line. So what can I do to make that more interesting? And I can add some splash of water. All right, so I want one that's going to be behind the ship off to the side, and then I want another one that's going to be the front of the ship going back. And that really just allows that ship to just pop off of there much better. And then when you add the depth of the different elements, that'll make it more interesting as well. I toyed with the idea of adding a glow behind the ship, and it just did not work because it didn't look natural then. It made it look like it was outlined, which is fine when it works for the components of the watch because they're not part of the scene, they're part of the watch. So that works, saying that they're not part of it. In fact, it kind of brings them in the forefront, makes it almost like you're looking through a window at the image behind. But so once I have all the elements in place here, when I go to print it out, I have to test it several different times because it's going to take me a while to get the image exactly how I want it. So the first thing I have to do is remove the color because I can't print the color. Once I have that removed, then I can output this as a PNG file, and I can bring it into the laser etching software, and I can make different demos of that. Okay, so here I've got it on my 20 watt fiber laser, and I'm etching on a black anodized aluminum. I use cardstock. I can get 2 dials on each card. It's a really easy way for me to work with it. And I can already tell that this is going to be too dark in the ship. There's too much black in it. And I'll explain how you can correct that. And that's one of the most important things, really, is to use your levels section in Photoshop to limit the amount of levels. In fact, here, I'll show you. This is the first pass. Okay, and you can see there's a lot of black in the ship and in the clouds. And then here's the adjusted version after I limited the amount of dark levels. Okay, so now that we have the final image adjusted, we can import it into whatever software we use to drive our laser. In my case, I use Lightburn. So I bring in the dial and I size it to the size that I want. And it's also, you have to, all right, this particular image will be printed, well, etched on every single layer of the dial. But then I will cut out certain bits of it on different layers to create the sandwich effect and allow the layer below to show through in certain places. So you have to create those cut patterns also in Photoshop, and you import them in as a black image with a clear transparent background, and then there's ability to trace the images in here, and you can create the cut path. So this will be the layer for the water. This will actually be the blue layer. So that first initial layer will all be orange. This will all be orange. Then I will do a layer where I also etch this exact same image, but I also etch this cut path on it as well that will cut all the way through the aluminum. So I can punch out the different holes, the different sections, all these little teeny pieces in here will all be cut out. And it'll allow then the orange to show through all those holes. All right, and this layer then is painted blue because it's going to be the ocean. But then the next layer is also going to have the ship, all the same things etched on it. but its cut path is everything but the ship and the round circles and the indices. And so that allows the blue of the ocean to show through. So you essentially have the three layers. You have the orange of the background, then you have the blue, and then you have the front layer, which is the ship and the other elements. But because we added different shading and things in there, it really gives illusion that there's even more depth to it. With the watch elements feel like they're sitting in front of the ship, so that creates even more depth to the dial. And then finally, the last cut is that you need to then cut out the circle for the watch, the hole for the center, and then I also do two little divots in the top that won't show once the dial is in the case. It's blocked by the case, and that helps me line up the layers of the dial on this special Swiss equipment that I will show you in a few minutes that allows me to do precise dial alignment. It's incredible. So here you can see the areas that were punched out in the various dial layers. And then you can also see that I went ahead and airbrushed the orange, the blue, and then left the final layer as it was. And then the next step is to assemble the dials. And here's where I use my Swiss-made incredible alignment tool to precisely align those dials. It's fully adjustable. It's just really an amazing piece of technology. All right, two things that make the gluing process much easier are the little tube on the right side and the paintbrush, both of which you can get really cheap on Amazon if you buy them in a bigger quantity. They're pennies a piece, or less than a penny a piece for the plastic component. It makes gluing a lot easier. That way you can get a really thin, even layer, because that's what's important when you're fastening the different layers together. You don't want to have too much glue because it'll spill out over the edges, and not enough glue, it won't stick. So it's really a fine balance, and the only way you can really achieve that is by doing it. And I would say out of every 5 dials I create, 3 I love that are great, and 2 don't pass my quality control. Oftentimes based on the gluing process, just if I see a little tiny spot of glue somewhere that shouldn't be there, that'll be enough to get rid of that dial then. Okay, so here's the final dial in a case, and I think it turned out really nice. So thank you very much for tuning in to this episode. I hope that you got something out of it. You know, I'm not, again, this is just my way of doing things. Whether it's the right way or the wrong way, there is no right or wrong way. And that's one of the thoughts I want to leave you with. Our biggest obstacle to success is the fear of failure. If you go ahead and realize that failure is only a step in the process, you need to have some failures along the way to truly innovate, because that's where you realize, wow, this is where I need to go the next step beyond. How do I work around this? So give it a try. Go for it. Whatever it is you want to do, you can do it. Just got to think that you can and not be afraid of the results. And you will get better over time, and you'll find what it is that you're truly passionate about. Anyway, I'm Peg Leg Don, and we'll see you again next time. Ahoy.
Come on, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Won't you join me on this journey? Where we'll end up, no one knows. Take my hand, girl, be my whole world. Feel the wonder our future holds. Let's go.